All right, back here on Inside Wrestling Radio. And today on the telephone, we have Cueball Carmichael. Cueball Carmichael has a 28-year professional wrestling career. 10-plus years of that have been in promoting successful independent organization. He has trained such talent as Joey Mercury, Christian York, Otto Schwanz, and many others at his IPWA Wrestling Academy. He's been an independent wrestler since 1983 and has been a promoter from 96 to now at the IPWA and AWF. He's worked briefly for the WWE. He's done enhancement stuff. He's done just about everything there is imaginable by this resume I have here in front of me, Cueball. But right now, welcome to the program, Cueball Carmichael. Cueball, how you doing, man?
Hey, Ricky Regal, the hustle behind the muscle. How are you?
Hey, man, doing great. And listen, it's cool to have you on the phone, man. I'm going to tell you something. I found you on Facebook. And, Bo, I'm going to tell you something. One of the most interesting guys out there. I mean, some of the stuff you write up, and it's not just every now and then this guy writes stuff on his Facebook page. Just about every day you come up with these great stories, man. And everything, pretty much to a point, everything you say, I'm right there with you, bro. Where did that mentality come from?
Well, I think, Ricky, it comes from probably being trained old school years ago. I spent some time in Hawaii training at Peter Maivia's wrestling school under the tutelage of his wife, Leah Maivia. I trained a lot of Samoans. A lot of times Lars Anderson gets the credit for training me in Hawaii, but he really didn't. I worked with him. But, and then 5 years later, I had embarked on a pretty successful independent career, and for some strange reason, I decided I really needed to know more about wrestling in the old school style, and I spent about 10 months with the great Lou Thez in Norfolk, Virginia. And I think what happens is I'm trained an old school guy, and I watch what's happened and progressed with the state of professional wrestling, both on the independents and with WWE, what I can stand to watch to this corner of my eyes squinting, making a grimace on my face. I tried to watch Ring of Honor a couple of times, and it's, I find it very difficult to watch. And TNA I watched a couple of times, and but I see a lot of the independent stuff and the way that people have gotten in the business now. When I got in the business, I was 6'1", 225 pounds. A kid, they looked at me, they thought I was too small. They wanted to send me away. Now you can be 5'6", 180 pounds, or 5'6", 300 pounds, and you can get in the business. And my observations are honest observations. There's guys like Mike Maverick, who was a great independent wrestler and was in the WWE as bowed up and jacked up with Otto Schwanz. Guys like Bull Payne and Tom Brandy have been around a long time that, agree with me on a lot of these things. And really they're just observations, Ricky, of the state of the business today as compared to what it was back when there was some mystique to it, right, and it was really difficult to get in.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's go back to those early times. I definitely want to talk about your thoughts on Ring of Honor, man, because I got a lot of thoughts on those cats too, and we'll do that a little bit later. But let's go way back, man. Before you got into the business, always a fan, or how did you get involved?
Always a fan. It happened for me. I'm Canadian born, but I was raised in upstate New York, and I always was fascinated. When I was 9 years old, I heard my mother screaming in the living room, and I remember it distinctly. She was a rather conservative woman, and I ran in, and Freddie Blassie's jabbing a pencil into the head of some poor guy, and he's bleeding all over the place, and my mother's reacting as if it's happening in her own front yard, and I said, oh my God, I can't believe this. So I became hooked. I got a job as security at Broome County Arena in Binghamton, New York, and I made sure I was available to work the wrestling cards. Yeah. I think the highlight of being a fan was there was a small independent wrestling card ran by the WWF at Ithaca College in upstate New York, and I accidentally, I was selling cars at the time, and I was in a suit, and I guess it got me by security, and I walked in the locker room, and there sits Jimmy Snuka talking to Gorilla Monsoon. I froze in my tracks and was dumbfounded, and before they looked up and realized they didn't belong and said, hey, man, you need to get out of here, and, man, I was hooked from that point on. I had to be part of it. And I mortgaged and sold everything I owned to go to wrestling school.
Really?
Yeah, I had a house and snowmobiles and a car, and I sold everything and gave up, moved 5,000 miles away to Hawaii to train to be a professional wrestler. I was just hooked at that point.
Unbelievable. And, a lot of guys, especially some of these newer guys that you talk about and I talk about from time to time, just don't have that commitment, man, or that level of, I guess you'd say, love for the business. What do you think happened, bro, between the way you and I came up on the business and our respect for it to where we are today with these guys who go to these $5 wrestling schools and all of a sudden you can't tell them anything.
Well, I think there's a couple of things that happened, and it's a myriad of them kind of combined. I think number one is when we got in, there was some mystique to the business.
Absolutely.
You really weren't sure.
Yeah.
You didn't dare approach the wrestlers. They were bigger than life.
Right.
And when you got in, it was hard to get in. And when you got in, they made you pay before they smartened you up and taught you about the business from the inside.
Right.
And what happened is, a lot of blocks are the foundation for what it's become today. And one of them is that, when Vince raided the independents the first time and kind of left everything in a mess and territories were folded and they were gone. And, I think pretty much a guy who had learned a little bit about wrestling decided he could train a guy in his backyard in a makeshift ring and put him in the ring. And if you had money, you could get in the business. If you had a few bucks, you could run a show.
Yeah.
And that was the beginning of the end, in my opinion, when money got you in the business instead of heart and passion. When we got in, you had to have a heart and you had to have passion for the business because they made it a business. The door to the business was not something you could knock on once to get in. You couldn't open the knob and walk in the door.
Yeah.
You had to fight your way in that door. You had to get your toe in that door and work your way into it. And show these guys that you were willing to take a beating on a daily basis to be able to get in and stay in the business before you learned what the business was about.
Absolutely.
And I think that's gone, Ricky.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And talk a little bit about getting in as you did break in. What was one of the first things, because I know what you're going to say, what was one of the first things that was pounded into your head coming into the business, a green guy with no experience?
Well, the thing that was taught to me is, there was a couple things. Number one was, you had to pay to get in, and you paid every day in training. I mean, it was rough, it was physical, it was 3 hours a day, right from the beginning. I was taught that if in training I hurt a guy, guess what, Q, you're going to go and you're going to get another job, and you're going to pay this guy's bills if you hurt him. You're responsible for that guy.
Right.
And, shut your mouth. You don't know anything about the wrestling business, and when you do a couple hundred shows, you've been on, 100 shows, you've wrestled 200, 300, 400 matches, then you can start having some input into the business, but you're going to earn that input in the business. You're not going to just walk in and open your mouth in a locker room.
Yeah, and that right there is the key, my friend. I mean, I remember seeing guys literally get the taste slapped out of their mouths for speaking out of turn, man, and you just don't see that anymore, and I, for one, miss it.
Yeah, I miss it too. It taught us. I mean, it didn't take me much because, thank God, I had a guy in a locker room with me in Hawaii. I mean, my first locker room that I was in had Mark Lewin. It had Tor Kamada. It had Steve Ricard from Australia. And, man, I'm telling you, I saw a guy speak out of line. And from that point on, that guy's job every month when they ran a show, and I was in training, but I went to the shows. I wasn't wrestling on them. But every month, that guy's job, and in training, that guy's job was to go and get this, go and get that. I mean, he spent 10 minutes in the ring and 2 hours running errands. And I remember one night a show at the Neil Blaisdell Center in Honolulu. They sent this guy out 3 different times to get the right cigarettes, and he came back and went out, came back and went out, came back and went out. And when he got back with the right ones, they threw him in the trash can because nobody smoked. It was, and I remember, and I can't remember if it was Steve Ricard or Mark Lewin, but somebody turned and said, the best thing about sending that guy out to get something, and somebody said, what? They go, the 50 minutes he's gone. And that was the business, man. I learned not to say anything. I spoke when I was spoken to.
Right.
I went in the locker room. I shook everybody's hand. I sat down next to the veterans. I listened to what they were talking about in their matches. I got dressed. I shut up. When a veteran said, you're working with me tonight, what do you want to do? My answer was, whatever you want to do, sir. I'll be there for everything I can be there for and do the best I can do. And, that garners a lot of respect. And today, all guys want to do, see, we worked back then, we worked for the crowd. We worked for the people because anybody that thinks that a promotion is paying you is wrong. The promotion's the middleman between the people that are paying you.
Sure.
And when you go out there, you got to wrestle and it's about what the people respond to. It's not about getting your stuff in the ring and getting your moves in. Oh, I saw Randy Orton and Cody Rhodes do this last week. Let me try this. That's not the business. But that's unfortunately what the business has metamorphosized into.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely, man. And you couldn't have not have said it better. That I was just thinking while you were talking there about it, and I just recently did a show here at the Christmas at the beginning of the month, and some of those younger guys, man, out there working out the entire match. In the back, going over it, and actually to the point of, okay, when you reverse me, and doing the reverse in the dressing room, and I'm just looking at these cats like, wait, what? Really?
It's terrible, man. It's terrible. And I say this. I say, listen, if you can't go in a locker room, I mean, it's like when I worked Buddy Landell. I said, what do you want to do for a finish? That was it.
Yep.
When I worked Jimmy Snuka,
yep.
What, you going to give me the splash for the finish yet? Nothing else was said. Nothing was said in the ring, nothing. We just went out and did what we do
yeah.
because, everybody was trained 20, 30 years ago. They were trained the old school style.
Right.
These kids have to go in the back and plan everything out. And then the funny thing is, if you watch them, they forget half the stuff anyway.
Absolutely.
And, when they go out there
yeah.
and they wonder why the crowd looks like a freaking oil painting. It's a still life oil painting of still life. And
yeah.
they wonder why. Well, guess what? If the crowd's not buying into what you're selling
yeah.
and you're out there and you don't know how to do catch as catch can or go with it or do something for the crowd, you're just doing it for yourself.
Yeah.
It's another nail in the coffin of the wrestling business every time that happens. And I don't think people realize that because they're so egomaniacal now, Ricky, that they only want to go out there and work for themselves. They
yep.
think they're working for themselves and not for the people.
Yep.
And that's not the business, but that's the state the business is in, unfortunately.
Absolutely. Cueball, we're up on a break right now. Man, it's so many things I want to talk to you about. When we get back from the break, I want to talk a little bit about your WWE/F time, and then I want to move into what's going on your Facebook page and stuff like that. And we'll do all that when we get back from the break right here on Inside Wrestling Radio with Cueball Carmichael.